What is a family secret or a private moment you witnessed that completely changed the way you look at a relative? When I was in maybe my late teens, I asked my uncle at a family gathering about his new job. He had been laid off from a management position and was out of work for a bit, and I knew he'd just started work at a candy manufacturing plant. I want to say it was a typical shit job working a production line, the kind of job you take to keep your family afloat when you're desperate. I naively said something to the effect of, "How's the new job? Do you like it?" To which he replied, "No, it's terrible." I don't think I had ever, up to that point, had an adult nakedly admit to me that sometimes the world kicks you in the ass and you take a shitty job when it's better than nothing. Sometimes you realize some work is better than no work. Especially if your family needs the help, you gotta do it. But it's typically better for your mental health to work some job rather than have no job. Yeah, definitely. And I do think this interaction played a part in my lifelong work ethic. I was just a little gobsmacked to hear an adult tell a kid so plainly that no, they don't like or want the job they have, and they're pretty unhappy with the situation. No putting on a brave face, just a straight up, "this sucks." About a year after my grandfather died, I was visiting my grandmother. She is the epitome of a southern lady, and she keeps her emotions in check. She's always been a little cold, blunt, and formal. She cried a bit at his funeral, but she kept her armor on that day and ever since. So a year later, I'm getting ready for the day while she talks to my parents in the kitchen. She broke down and sobbed, talking about how lonely she is and how much she missed him. I can recall the pain in her voice and her crying. I sobbed in the other room while my parents talked her through it, and she was able to put her armor back on. Ever since then, it's been about a year, I have had a different perspective on her and her journey. I've been more real with her, and surprisingly, she's been more real with me. She turns 90 in a few months. She's doing really well, but you never know how much time you have left with someone. My mother had not been married to my father since the early 80s. I was 18 months old when she left him. She left my stepfather when I was 12 years old, told me to choose if I wanted to stay with my stepfather or go with my dad. Left me to pack on my own and had left before I did. My 1 year old brother and 6 year old brother didn't see her for months. She left him with an alcoholic. We never even knew her address. I chose my dad. He was my ride or die. Best decision I ever made. My father died in 2001 from aggressive cancer. I was 19 and devastated. Mother had inserted herself into his life right at the end, calling but never visiting him in hospital or at home. He hadn't updated his will. She took everything, threw me out of my father's home, sold it, and has lived off of what he left behind ever since. His brothers did nothing. Also, her mother, my grandmother, refused to speak to me for the last 2 years of her life because I didn't call and thank her for the empty birthdays card, which was punishment for not cashing her previous $15 check, which would have cost me $7 plus bus fare to do. I never knew my grandparents loved each other until I started visiting them during the summer as a teenager. They were very old school, very reserved in front of others. One morning, I came down the stairs and saw them in the kitchen before they could see me. My grandma was sitting at the table with her coffee, reading the paper, and my grandpa brought her breakfast before gently patting her head. And when she looked up at him, it was like a physical manifestation of pure love passed between them. She smiled at him and reached up and patted his hand, and he leaned down and kissed her forehead in a way that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. It was the first time I saw them be physically affectionate outside of a handhold or pat on the shoulder, and completely changed how I saw their relationship. After that moment, I paid better attention and saw the ways they loved each other without words. And when no one was looking and saw so many quiet examples of a deep love, they were married 65 years. My grandparents, or rather my grandpa, made it much more obvious. He proudly stated once that even after 60 years of marriage, they still regularly went to bed early with a massive grin on his face. My grandma turned beet red instantly, but looked at my grandpa so obviously and deeply in love. Too much information, but still, kind of sweet that after so long together, they could still act like teenagers in love around each other. I remember being a very small child, 3-ish, visiting my great grandparents, and my mom being very upset and shouting no while pulling me away from a great uncle who was trying to put me in his lap. She never wanted him to be near me. I thought it was because he was usually drunk. Years later, she told me that when she was 7, this uncle tried to make her put her hand in his pocket because he had a worm in there and she could play with it. She was also worried about this uncle's behavior with her little sister. She told her mother and got screamed at. "Stop being so nasty. It isn't true what they say about Murray. There's nothing wrong with Murray." She was upset that her mother wouldn't protect her and her sister, and that she was called nasty for trying to tell her. My grandmother often acted in very peculiar ways. My grandfather once sadly said that something very bad happened when she was growing up. He didn't know what it was, but something happened that made her mind not right. She was suspicious and accusatory of innocent people, but turned her head to her brother's perversion. I apparently had a great Uncle Touchy as well, and my mother absolutely refused to allow me to be alone with him and strictly forbade her parents from taking me over to his house at all for any reason. This caused a lot of strife in the family at the time. An aunt was a lot more permissive. He's family, and I hope nothing happened with her kids. When he died, my mother didn't attend the funeral, which caused its own set of problems with that side of the family. After I got dumped by my partner of 6 years, I moved back home. I always had a close relationship with my grandparents, and I've had a key to their house since I can remember. One day it was just my granny and I, and she started telling me about the man she almost married before grandpa. This was news to me because they were pretty perfect together. 60 plus years of marriage and still laughing and joking with each other all the time. But apparently, there was another man in town who had been kind of courting my granny back in the day, and she thought that he was going to be the one she married. Then she went to a village dance, saw my grandpa, and that was it. She told me that the man she almost married had stayed in town and married someone else, and that he beat his wife terribly. She had a kind of mix of guilt and relief that her life had gone a different way, but guilt that someone else still went through that. It was really sad and had clearly stuck with her all this time. She passed last year, and I always wondered if she'd ever told that story to anyone else. Then, at her funeral, my aunt, her daughter, was talking about how much Granny had worried if my sister's boyfriend was a kind man, and how that was all she asked about. Maybe I'm making assumptions, but I think she was thinking about her almost husband and worrying about my sister ending up in a marriage like that. Fortunately, my now brother in law is a great guy. Mine had a similar story. They lost touch during the war because she wasn't super confident writing to him. She'd had to leave school to work, so didn't get a full education. Her writing was fine and she was very smart, but she didn't think she was. She met my granddad shortly after. My granddad was such a lovely, gentle man, so it worked out very well for her, but things could have turned out so differently. She was a force of nature, so that awful man may have ended up buried under a patio somewhere, but I'm really glad she got to spend her life with someone kind instead. I feel very sorry for the woman who ended up with a horrible one. Domestic violence was so unrecognized at the time, and there was so little support for women who tried to leave. It's not easy to leave now, but before there were really shelters and women were able to be properly financially independent, and there was so much stigma around being abused and airing your dirty laundry, it must have been impossible. That poor lady must have been trapped in hell. The childhood friend of my father, their families had been close for at least 50 years, was the type of guy to make inappropriate jokes around 13-year-old boys, and my father would laugh it off as a joke. My father would go to his place and take me with himself when I was around 15, when my uncle heard that he very sternly warned me to stay away from him. Over time, I grew uneasy around him, and when I was 18, he managed to get me to stay for one night in his place for my safety. Even called and convinced my mother and tried to save me. If he wasn't drunk and I couldn't fight him off, I have no clue what would that night be like. Later tried to talk to my father about his friend and he waved me off by saying that it was all rumors. God didn't even listen to me to understand that I was talking about first-hand experience. I stopped talking to my father from that day until he died. Was he confused and tried to keep in touch with you? Or did he know deep down why you stopped talking to him? Deep down, he knew why I stopped talking to him, but the issue was never discussed openly, and he tried to keep in touch with me. I know that because when he was discharged from ICU, my aunt and sister was with him, and he asked of me before anything else. My grandma found a pack of cigarettes when I was about 14, 15 and asked if they were mine. I said no, but she then said to me, they must be your dad's. I'll ask him why they were hidden in your drawer. Then I confessed they were mine. She didn't get mad, she just said, well then let's have a smoke, shall we? Smoked a cigarette with her. She had stopped smoking about 12 years before that. We both never spoke of it again. I came back home after my first year of college, was in the car with my mom and my two younger brothers. Mom starts telling me how she caught my youngest brother smoking cigarettes, so she made him smoke a whole pack. I can never look at several of my family members the same. One aunt didn't take her aging dog to the vet, and he was losing his sight and in pain. Another uncle kicked the dog because he snapped at him. Didn't bite, just snapped, because of how much pain he was in. And another uncle also refused to take their dog to the vet and wouldn't allow me to do it when I offered. I've had to call the RSPCA on that one and will never look at any of them the same. Being told all my life that we let things slide because family is the most important, but then they do things like this that I can't let go. And I finally realized that family is not the most important. Fuck those people. Animal abusers are the worst. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. People who abuse animals will also abuse people, and no, one can change my mind. An abuser is an abuser is an abuser. My uncle likely killed my grandfather, shredded and forced his will, and there's a strong possibility that he and his wife faked their own deaths and are in Brazil. They also staged multiple charity events that only benefited them and their friends. I was the only child left out of my grandfather's will, and I will never know what his last wishes were for me. He was the only person who really believed in me for most of my life, and I was his only grandchild who never asked for anything. I rarely share this with anyone because it sounds so unbelievable, and it hasn't exactly been easy to cope with. Oh dang, that would be so hard to have that suspicion and info. Have you ever considered a PI? I wonder if they could help open and then close a few doors for you. So my mother and my other uncle, who sadly passed 2 years ago, hired one, and they were able to find everything from shredded evidence of the original will to transfers, gaps in the timeline, and inconsistencies in how my grandfather passed, like medical records, etc. But then the first uncle I mentioned passed, and his wife passed roughly a few weeks after him when the investigation was getting to the wire. No funerals or anything, which is what tipped a lot of my family off because they were both very egotistical people. And the investigation was halted, and my mom couldn't afford to keep the PI on her own without my second uncle. At the funeral for him about 2 years ago, the oldest daughter of the first uncle told us that she didn't think he or his wife actually died either. And one of my siblings, who's very blunt and logical, is convinced that he might be in Brazil, possibly Switzerland. Cliche, I know. And my oldest cousin very much agreed with him. My parents divorced when I was 3. Dad moved back to his home state soon after. He eventually remarried. I think I was about 7 when I met her. She was hot, big curly red hair, always done up, tight pants, nails, big hoop earrings. They had motorcycles, a nice place, and had me and my brother out for the summer. Had a birthday party for me, tons of G.I. Joes. I thought, well, this two family thing ain't that bad. That was the only time I met her though, because it turned out she wasn't an overnight trucker, like she said. She was actually a prostitute that serviced a lot of truckers and other clients. She got arrested, they ended up divorced, and I lost interest in my dad because he was kind of a wiener and an asshole.